In her innermost heart, Lily knew it was not by appealing to the fraternal instinct that she was likely to move Gus Trenor. But this way of explaining the situation helped to drape its crudity, and she was always scrupulous about keeping up appearances to herself. Her personal fastidiousness had a moral equivalent, and when she made a tour of inspection in her own mind, there were certain closed doors she did not open. As they reached the gates of Bellomont, she turned to Trenor with a smile. "The afternoon is so perfect. Don't you want to drive me a little farther? I've been rather out of spirits all day, and it's so restful to be away from people, with someone whom I don't mind if who someone who won't mind if I'm a little dull." She looked so plaintively lovely as she proffered the request, so trustfully sure of his sympathy and understanding, that Trenor felt himself wishing that his wife could see how other women treated him. Not battered wire pullers like Mrs. Fisher, but a girl that most men would have given their boots to get such a look from. Out of spirits? Why on earth should you ever be out of spirits? Is your last box of Duchette dresses a failure? Or did Judy rook you out of everything at bridge last night? Lily shook her head with a sigh. "I have had to give up Duchette. And bridge, too. I can't afford it. In fact, I can't afford any of the things my friends do. And I'm afraid Judy often thinks me a bore because I don't play cards any longer, and because I am not as smartly dressed as the other women. But you will think me a bore, too, if I talk to you about my worries, and I only mention them because I want you to do me a favor, the very greatest of favors." Her eyes sought his once more, and she smiled inwardly at the tinge of apprehension that she read in them. "Why, of course, if it's anything I can manage," he broke off, and she guessed that his enjoyment was disturbed by the remembrance of Miss Fisher's methods. "The greatest of favors," she rejoined gently. "The fact is, Judy is angry with me, and I want you to make my peace." "Angry with you? Oh, come, nonsense!" His relief broke through with a laugh. "Why, you know she's devoted to you. She is the best friend I have, and that is why I mind having to vex her. But I dare say you know what she has wanted me to do. She has set her heart, poor dear, on my marrying a great deal of money." She paused with a slight falter of embarrassment, and Trenor, turning abruptly, fixed on her a look of growing intelligence. "A great deal of money? Oh, by Jove, you don't mean Grice? What, you do? Oh, no, of course I won't mention it. You can trust me to keep my mouth shut. But Grice! Good Lord, Grice! Did Judy really think you could bring yourself to marry that portentous little ass? But you couldn't, eh? So you gave him the sack, and that's the reason why he lit out by the first train this morning." He leaned back, spreading himself farther across the seat, as if dilated by the joyful sense of his own discernment. "How on earth could Judy think you could do such a thing? I could have told her that you'd never put up with such a little milksop." Lily sighed more deeply. "I sometimes think," she murmured, "that men understand a woman's motives better than other women do." "Some men, I'm certain of it. I could have told Judy," he repeated, exulting in the implied superiority over his wife. "I thought you would understand. That's why I wanted to speak to you," Miss Bart rejoined. "I can't make that kind of marriage. It is impossible. But neither can I go on living as all the women in my set do. I am almost entirely dependent on my aunt, and though she is very kind to me, she makes me no regular allowance, and lately I've lost money at cards, and I don't tell her about it. I've paid off my card debts, of course, but there is hardly anything left for my other expenses. And if I go on with my present life, I shall be in horrible difficulties. I have a tiny income of my own, but I'm afraid it's badly invested, for it seems to bring in less every year. I'm so ignorant of money matters that I don't know if my aunt's agent, who looks after it, is a good adviser." She paused a moment, and added in a lighter tone, "I didn't mean to bore you with all this, but I want your help in making Judy understand that I can't, at present, go on living as one must live amongst you all. I am going away tomorrow to join my aunt at Richfield, and I shall stay there for the rest of the autumn, and dismiss my maid, and learn how to mend my own clothes." At this picture of loveliness and distress, the pathos of which was heightened by the light touch with which it was drawn, a murmur of indignant sympathy broke from Trenor. 24 hours earlier, if his wife had consulted him on the subject of Miss Bart's future, he would have said the girl with extravagant tastes and no money had better marry the first rich man she could get. But with the subject of discussion at his side, turning to him for sympathy, making him feel that he understood her better than her dearest friends, and confirming the assurance by the appeal of her exquisite nearness, he was ready to swear that such a marriage was a desecration, and that, as a man of honor, he was bound to do all he could to protect her from the results of her disinterestedness. This impulse was reinforced by the reflection that if she had married Grice, she would have been surrounded by flattery and approval, whereas, having refused to sacrifice herself to expediency, she was left to bear the whole cost of her resistance. Hang it, if he could find a way out of such difficulties for a professional sponge like Carrie Fisher, who was simply a mental habit corresponding to the physical titillations of the cigarette or the cocktail, he could surely do as much for a girl who appealed to his highest sympathies, and who brought her troubles to him with the trustfulness of a child. Trenor and Miss Bart prolonged their drive to long after sunset, and before it was over he had tried, with some show of success, to prove to her that, if she would only trust him, he could make a handsome sum of money for her without endangering the small amount she possessed. She was too genuinely ignorant of the manipulations of the stock market to understand his technical explanations, or even perhaps to perceive that certain points in them were slurred. The haziness enveloping the transaction served as a veil for her embarrassment, and through the general blur her hopes dilated like lamps in a fog. She understood only that her modest investment were to be mysteriously multiplied without risk to herself, and the assurance that this miracle would take place within a short time, that there would be no tedious intervals for suspense and reaction, relieved her of her lingering scruples. Again, she felt the lightening of her load, and with it the release of repressed activities. Her immediate worries conjured, it was easy to resolve that she would never again find herself in such straits, and as the need of economy and self-denial receded from her foreground, she felt herself ready to meet any other demands which life might make. Even the immediate one of letting Trenor, as they drove homewards, lean a little nearer and rest his hand reassuringly on hers, cost her only a momentary shiver of reluctance. It was part of the game to make him feel that her appeal had been an uncalculated impulse, provoked by the liking he inspired, and the renewed sense of power in handling men, while it consoled her wounded vanity, helped also to obscure the thought of the claim at which his manner hinted. He was a coarse, dull man who, under all his show of authority, was a mere supernumerary in the costly show for which his money paid. Surely, to a clever girl, it would be easy to hold him by his vanity, and so keep the obligation on his side. End of Chapter 7.